They said Apple and Google loved it. Chris would say, who gives a fuck?
Name Apple and Google. Of course, they're going to tell you whatever.
Yeah. If Apple and Google love it, do not ship it, right? That, dude.
Every time they do App of the Year, it's like Apex Legends. It's like, that game is killed. No, it won.
Dude, they don't know all about gaming on their platforms, that they should not be even a consideration.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games 370. I'm Jen Donahoe, live from DICE in Vegas. I fill the marketing and publishing role on today's podcast. Today we have...
Chris, strategy investing.
Phil Black, monetization czar.
Mishka Katkov, friend of the founder, is an LA Dodgers fan.
Well, they did win the World Series as an LA living
winners.
person. Well done.
I like winners.
Yeah, well done. All right, here's what we have on the podcast today. Newzoo has a year-end PC console performance recap. Roblox had their earnings report. They continued to grow, but they finally have some signs that it's slowing down, and we're going to go through a lot of that today. We have an update on a small company called Budge, which does kids games, and how they were just purchased by a PE company. So really interesting there. Clash Royale had a halftime counter programming show with Lil Wayne. And then it's Cress's Christmas because we're going to talk about Ilka, from the CEO of Supercell's annual blog, which just sets him alight. So if you love to hear Cress get pissed off, just wait for that segment. And then, in sad news, we wish the best to the 80 folks laid off from Riot's 2XKO fighting game. Phil has some spicy takes on Riot. And as a former Rioter, I'm going to fight you on some of that. Anyway, there is a SaaS-pocalypse going on in the stock market right now. It first hit the game industry and now it's hitting SaaS. And then Liftoff, actually an ad company, just postponed its IPO on the NASDAQ because of the $800 billion has been wiped out of the entire stock market because of what's going on with AI. So, Cress, do you have a take?
AI is a existential threat to some degree to some of the tools that are out there on the software as a service industry. Like they could replace a lot of the functionality of these tools. So that's scary. But I honestly don't think it really applies to gaming. And I think the AI bubble and a lot of people are writing about how it's going to impact games is a little bit, actually not a little bit, way overstated. But for the software as a service category, there is potential that some of these things will get disrupted pretty significantly if a lot of these capabilities are just replaced by AI.
Like Salesforce is down. That's what I know as a shareholder. Anyway, I have to say about Liftoff, their financials were not great because they were sort of comparing themselves to AppLovin, and I think that was kind of pushing them to go public. But this company had approximately $635 million in trailing revenue, and at the same time, it was posting actually losses of about $26 million a year. This is not AppLovin mini. So
got it.
Hedge fund hotel, as somebody would say.
and Unity has gotten absolutely fucking annihilated, right? Partially because of this, but also because they guided to poor revenue guidance for Q1, and it was spooked the fuck out of people. It's down 30% today. So that's kind of independent of this SaaS apocalypse, but it's all tied in. And again, the moral of the story is don't buy individual stocks, buy the VTI. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over again. If you're trading these names, you're not being very smart. And I'm looking at
the
you,
efficient
Nico.
market hypothesis. Happy to have you.
But I do have to defend Unity. Unity is up by 5 or almost 6% compared to last year. If you take a full year, they're actually up. So despite losing 56% this year alone, they're up.
So Josh, I'm sorry, Josh. Reality did not match the hype that was being built on Unity. And I think Bromberg did a great job of pushing that hype. But the reality is they have no access to data, garbage in, garbage out, and the licensing engine business is shit. And so it's game over, dude.
They crushed earnings, but you said the reason it's down is because of forward guidance?
Yeah. And there's nothing left in the tank.
Stock is different than real business. So,
all right. So, on the shill section, just a quick thank you to Mike Williams. I did my Yoda session, which is I go and talk to some of these undergraduates. So this was at San Jose State University. So just a reminder to everyone, go out and volunteer, speak to the next generation. of game industry makers. There's so many different colleges that could use you. Do you know that Mike gets Frank Chabot, Peter Moore, Brian Knightley to present at his class? I think I should audit his class and go heckle these people in the back seats. Like it's amazing. And then there's others, like he had Travis Boatman's going in the fall semester too. So I spent a lot of time with Travis. Actually, last night at dinner, this dude is doing AI insane. So I'm gonna do a podcast with him on all the things he's doing with AI in his company and on his personal life. Right. He's doing the OpenClaw stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, no offense to Mr. Boatman, but he was pitching this shit like 2 years ago. So like, I don't know, man. AI is supposed to drive efficiencies, right? We're not, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, what I appreciated about our conversation is like, he was able to show me real things that he's doing, unlike all these other presentations I go to that's like vaporware of, well, AI and philosophy. And like, he's like, no, like, look at what Smoke is doing. His AI, his OpenClaw is called Smoke. And he's like, this is what it's doing right now. And it made us a song about our dinner. And like, I don't know. Anyway, so sign up for the Deconstructor of Fun newsletter, deconstructoroffun.com. All of the GDC invites will be going in there. Just a quick, save the date for the Beta Hat Deconstructor of Fun kickoff party on March 8th. And that is the Sunday. So you have to come in early for that. And then what else do we have on podcasts?
This week, we had Write Up and a podcast about AI and art direction. I'm sorry. This was just following that part. But we had a senior art director from SciPlay coming in and talking about art direction in general, but we actually steered a lot into AI talk and how is our direction, what do the teams look like going into the future. So it's a interesting conversation because usually art people avoid these conversations, but he didn't because he's a very business-minded art director. Anyway, give it a listen. I wonder what the art directors think about it. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, something that we've changed is we have way more genre and game deconstruction. So we have more contributors writing those. I'm looking at the output. People are really liking them. So we have Pixel Flow coming in probably this week. We got more Turks doing content. So it's, how it is. It's going to be golden.
I've heard rumors of a Puzzle Monthly. Can you confirm or deny such existence?
So we filmed already UA Monthly. Mr. Josh Chanley was there.
Oh.
And Puzzle Monthly, Philip Black kind of showed us the way with Shooter Monthly. So Puzzle Monthly is coming through. And we have AI Monthly as well. So monthly shows rolling out. Of course, I'm doing UA Monthly, Jen. Naturally, you should do the Product Monthly.
Oh my God. Dude, UA
why?
Monthly? Are you out of your gosh darn mind? You don't know shit about UA.
It was great. It was, that's why it's fun.
Okay. All right. Good job. Corrections.
Quick corrections. Baseball Hits 26 from Aries Studios is being designed and developed by many of the key members of Tap Sports Baseball that worked at Glue. So I actually knew this when he said it, but I wasn't 100% sure. And so I didn't want to correct him if I wasn't sure. So Mike DeLotte reached out and said, Mishka's an idiot. No, he didn't say that.
No, Mike DeLotte reached out. He's coming on a podcast, and just as we asked. But also, I will explain why I got this wrong. I only looked at one person, which is the head of studio of the previous one, and also my former boss. And he works at Scopely these days. So I was like, oh, he went to Scopely, and I assumed that he took the entire team, but he didn't. I should have done more research, but I did it during the podcast. And also, there was another correction regarding this news that Swift Games out of Berlin, which is another studio that Aries Game acquired, their founder informed us that they don't run on Club Mate. They run on Fritz Cola because Club Mate is something you drink in Hamburg. So important news.
Thank you for that.
All the Germans.
Everyone, we correct everything, apparently. Yep. All right. Web stores. You've seen what good looks like, but have you experienced great? AppCharge is the direct-to-consumer platform that powers over $500 million in transactions each year for top studios. They're not just another vendor. They're backed by Supercell and built by monetization veterans from Moonactive, Playtika, and other industry giants who understand the difference between merely functional and the truly exceptional. What sets them apart? Deeply personalized web stores with custom-designed offers, industry-leading monetization features, seamless in-game payment integration, and a robust SDK. While 70% of top-grossing games already have web stores, the ones scaling the fastest are doing it with AppCharge. Ready to transform good into great? Learn more at appcharge.com.
Eiffel Tower, iconic. Tower of London, historic. The two towers, simply epic. But none of them tell you anything about mobile app intelligence. Downloads, revenue, active users, and my personal favorite, weekly cohorted retention. Get the real story, get the real data, get Sensor Tower today.
All right, let's get into our first topic, which is Newzoo. They released an article that is about PC console year end. And so here is a few different things that I took away from it. So, by the way, this is for mostly on revenue 2025 releases. And then on MAU, they do kind of like full year because you kind of have to of what's the top of the game. So in 2025, PC and console revenue was clustered around a small number of higher impact titles rather than a wide spread of titles. I mean, this is pretty consistent. Live service still dominates, especially in MAU. You know, you got CS2, you got Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite. So it wasn't really about new launches there. And only a handful of 2025 releases actually crack the top MAU ratings. Post-launch support is strong. And I know Phil is a big proponent of LiveOps here. So Diablo had a big update. GTI 5 had some big updates that came out that really helped them. And then PC was friendlier to new IP versus console. And I think we've been seeing this trend where there's been a lot more AA indie success on PC than on console. It's, you know, obviously much easier to release on that versus getting console titles approved. So multiple non-franchise titles hit the top 10 in revenue on PC, while console remained dominated by annualized sports franchises and established brands. I mean, this is the same thing we always talk about, that PlayStation is all about sports. Xbox, you know, is about the shooters. And then Nintendo, first party is obviously strong. I think about half of the top 10 titles are first party, but there were a couple of the top PC titles in there. So you had, I think, Silksong and Hades were in there as well. But the number one title, I was a little bit surprised. Well, I wasn't too surprised. It was Pokemon. It was number one on this. So Phil, what do you take away from all of this?
It's stuff we've already known in the sense that Steam is composed of these weird hardliners. It's not like other platforms where you can have things like Schedule One, a drug dealing game, come out as the number 3 top PC game by revenue. Monster Hunter Wilds is like a very particular title. We also have things like Repo, another like indie hit, Kingdom Come Deliverance, just like stuff you don't see on other platforms. I think the most interesting thing is getting data on games that we're not normally able to cover because they don't have good Steam coverage. So Minecraft, for instance, is number 2 in terms of MAU, and we just don't have a lot of good empirical insight. So it's hard to say, oh, hey, there was an update, MAU went up or went down. Sims, number 5. You can see why Inzoi mattered so much. League of Legends 6, I would love to see a time series on this, but in number 8 is Valorant, and I think very quickly Valorant is going to become a more important product to Riot than League of Legends is. It'll be interesting to see how that changes the company. But these are games we don't always get insight into, and it's very good to get some actual data on them, and it shows that Steam still has some room to conquer. Like, these are games that are not on Steam. The market power is not 100% yet for them.
The only game that broke through the ranks in console that launched in 2025 was actually Arc Raiders. That's pretty neat.
I'm just going to say this is like the top 10 console and PC games by 2025 release. Actually really kind of unhelpful and misleading. And you guys are actually doing a little of that right now. It's, if you had added all games for 2025, not just the 25 releases, then a lot of these games would just get pushed right the fuck off these lists. And it would be the same games over and over again. Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA. I know why they don't do it. I think they're trying to like protect their database and so that they don't give up all the information. But this is totally misleading, right? In terms of what is actually doing well, right? Fortnite is not a top 10 revenue. No, I mean, that is a top 10,
Yeah.
All these games that are on the MAU charts are all top 10 revenues, and they would kick off many of these games. So yeah, I don't like these charts at all when they do this sort of thing. I think
just
they need
a different
to be more
cut of data,
honest about it.
Like, it's interesting to see the top 10 games by revenue that were released in the year. That's still important information that helps us make decisions.
It's not, because 85% of the revenue is being generated by games that have been continually being released, like the old games in the marketplace. That's like doing a top 10 revenue in mobile, right? Do you think that's a relevant number by release for 2025?
I think different cuts of data give you different insights. And I agree with you. There should have been a prep slide here that said, what is the share of revenue by these top 10 releases versus other? That would have been really powerful contextual information, but it's still important to know that like Repo was number 7 on the new releases.
No, because in this market, it's all about the incumbents these days, right? The market is being dominated by incumbents, and this kind of misleads the masses on what is successful out there.
Fair point. I mean, even with Nintendo, I think you know, and I was looking at that list, I was like, seems like a bunch of things are missing, you know, from that list because it was only 2025. Okay, let's move on to our next story. So Super Bowl happened. Sorry for those of you that don't care about American football. But during that time, Supercell Clash Royale had a halftime concert with Lil Wayne. And there's a pretty good YouTube song. And by the way, it was only one song. It wasn't like, you know, a whole thing. It was just one song, but it was kind of like a music video. It's pretty adorable. So this was counter programming to the delightful Bad Bunny show that was actually at the Super Bowl. I just pulled the YouTube views, 11.6 million in 4 days. I think on Monday it was at 7.7. So there's a lot of people who are actually seeing it on YouTube. Really well done. I mean, if one thing Supercell does fantastically well are their animated, you know, videos that mixed in with live action, mixed in with Lil Wayne singing. You know, as a marketing person, I wouldn't do this expecting to get big in-game KPIs. I mean, to be honest, I actually would not have done this strategy. I would not have done like a major moment like this with all the other stuff going on in the world. I don't know why you compete with one of the biggest events, you know, on TV. But, you know, hey, I would recommend shooting for an open window. But as of Monday, when I pulled some Sensor Tower data, I didn't see any in-game KPI movements on downloads or DAUs versus trends. Phil, check me on that. What did you see?
Yeah, you think? You think? I mean, this is the stupidest thing ever, right? What the fuck? Of course, 20,000 uptick in downloads. It's what I can see. I mean, Jesus Christ, what are you spending money on? This bullshit. I get this stuff. All right, sorry, Phil.
So, first of all, I agree with you, Eric. And the thing I would argue here is I still think there's insight, even if this one isn't particularly successful. Also, Lil Wayne, very strange choice. I'm not quite sure if that fits your target audience.
Whatever song he picked, like there was a lot of cursing that you could tell was there. And remember who is playing this game right now? 12-year-olds. This game is on fire with 12-year-olds.
No, and the thing that I kept going back to was this talk called The Rhythms of Free-to-Play Games. And it was given by someone named Toit van Duman, although I'm probably fucked up his name. It is German. And he has this slide called the butt. What is the butt? And we're looking at the butt right now on the screen. And the butt is a shape of a CCU curve or a PSU curve. So this is the number of simultaneous players that are online at any one time. And I can tell you that mobile studios spend very little time examining CCU or PSU because normally they don't have to do matchmaking. And so in HD, that's much more important. So you have to have a certain amount of a CCU online at any one time. Then you subdivide it by ranks. There's a bunch of things that make this more important. But mobile studios are almost always looking at things on a daily basis. And the insight of the butt is that it was from a particular game, and the butt had this nice little butt crack in the middle. And do anyone take a guess on what this butt crack represented?
Too many jokes, Phil. Too many jokes.
I will give you a hint. It's a halftime. It's a halftime of a football match. So what was happening is that before the match, there was a number of high CCU. The match started, CCU collapsed, and then it was halftime. Everyone diddled around on their phone. Then the game resumed, depressed again, and then the game was over, and then the PSU increased. And so the argument I would make here, and this is how I've started to think about LiveOps. You know, we think about LiveOps as, we update the game, we do user acquisition, but I think a far more instrumental and specific definition is just being relevant to your players at a certain time or place. And I think the Clash Royale event had the right strokes of being able to do that. Like people might dick around on their phones at halftime or during particular matches. And we're not spending enough time in mobile about trying to do ultra local LiveOps. Yes, we think about Lunar New Year. Yes, we think about these holidays. But I mean, specifically time and place. How can we get more involved into players' lives? Why didn't I get more push notifications at halftime from the mobile games I play? And the problem with the Supercell event is they launched it on Friday, but they didn't even launch it during the Super Bowl.
Oh, really?
It was available beforehand. Yeah, it was just kind of lame. Like it wasn't relevant in the way it should have been. And right now, if you're a mobile game developer, the World Cup is coming up, and you should be preparing your shit on how you're going to be relevant to players at halftime when they're dicking around on their phone. You should be having a push notification, interstitial funnel. You should be having some sort of event that they complete during the halftime show. So even though Supercell didn't execute, I think, with the funnel on this one, the creative was strong. I think it was like really well done. To your point, Jen, we were just looking at the video. It looked really cool. Bad musician, bad timing. I still think there's insight here that other teams should pick up now that the world's biggest sporting event is coming in a couple months.
All right. I know the audience is, I need to see the picture of the butt that Phil is putting up on screen. Check it out on Spotify video or YouTube. All right, let's go to the next story, which is Budge. Mishka, are you doing this one?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the closest to Budge because my kids play games made by Budge Studios. And this was an interesting one. So Budge, if you're not familiar, does a lot of IP-based kids games. We're talking about Barbie. We're talking about Bluey. We're talking about all of the, the big names. Exactly. Yeah. Paw Patrol, anything. So they work with the big brands, kids-specific brands. And I wasn't really that familiar with this company until this news broke out. And Haveli, on the other side, is private equity that is very much focused into gaming, quite unique. And they have built a very senior team, a lot of ex-Zynga people, a lot of people who have been operators in gaming industry have gone to private equity. And private equity means they buy a company, they improve it, and then they sell it or IPO it. So I'm confused by this one because Budge Studios did not publish their own games. They made games that were often published by others. And that one that has been publishing the most of their games has been Tilting Point. So my interest kind of went away from private equity and kids games into Tilting Point. And a question arose, where is Tilting Point? Because the last news that they released was they're going into UA funding. I think they were in before and they kind of came back. And when we kind of looked at the numbers, it feels that Budge Studios were one of the best assets they had within Tilting Point. And now if they've sold that to private equity, is Tilting Point essentially in a fire sale mode?
Seems like it. I don't know. I haven't heard much from them.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Without Budge, they don't really have anything else.
The last news from Tilting Point was in March when they launched a new $150 million UA fund.
Yeah.
Anyways, if somebody's working with Tilting Point and they are funding your UA,
General Atlantic was probably doing that UA stuff.
Yeah, this is weird.
It's still an interesting business that they've created. I think it's worth just spending a moment and talking about these games, which they've grown to doing as a portfolio around $5 million a month, which is pretty impressive. And their monthly active users sits around 25 million. They're kind of shareware games. They all kind of have a very similar model where they're free to download. And then sometimes there's some paid DLC that you're able to have. The Barbie one has small amounts of MTX, some gems that you're able to purchase. But when we talk about Apple Arcade, you guys were like trying to rebrand the subscription in many ways for Apple as something that you could hand off to your kids. I think these are also games that as a parent, you should feel comfortable handing off to your child. And that's exactly what they've gone after as a strategy. And I think they've been able to build some user trust in pursuing it.
Especially when I was looking at the Barbie game, it's a subscription game. And I forgot if it's weekly or monthly. I know Ethan was doing that for his daughter at the time. And so they were using a lot of the subscription model where, it's free to play. And then obviously your kid comes, crying that they can't really actually do anything in the game. And then you spend $9.99. But Barbie Dreamhouse has been incredibly successful for them. Bluey's another one that does really well. We forget about audiences. We just talked about kids. We talked about 12-year-olds. If you can be the hit game with 12-year-olds, as Brawl Stars and Crash Royale have done, that is an audience segment. And then it kind of goes into the next topic that we have, which is, again, appealing to kids, Roblox. So Roblox just had their Q4 earnings, which basically means that we have full year 2025. So they had big year-on-year numbers, but when you look at the Q3 to Q4 trend, it tells a little bit of a different story. DAU finally dropped quarter over quarter. It was only down 5% from Q3, but Q3 peaked at 151 million, and so it moved to 144. Adjusted EBITDA collapsed 96% year on year to essentially zero. Chris, I know you always have comments on that specific point, but I'm just noting the decline. The forward guidance signals clear deceleration. So for me, what I just saw for the first time was like, it doesn't look like it's continuing this massive trend that we've been seeing. Q1 of 26 implies a 20% sequential bookings decline. Full year 26 guidance calls for 22 to 26% bookings growth, way down from 2025's 55%. And then this will be the topic I think we talk a lot about is age. The 18 plus segment of users are the fastest growing segment, growing 2x faster than the under 18. And then from international, APAC grew almost 100% year on year. However, as we all know, it's very difficult to monetize that particular region. So the other thing I wanted to mention was their strategic focus. They kind of outlined 4 areas. And Chris, I know you're going to have a lot of comment on this. They are focused on 18 plus. That's their number one bullet point that they come out and say. Number 2 was AI. So creation, safety, discovery, monetization, social communication. It also plays into their third point, which is safety and civility as their strategic advantage. They use the word advantage. I thought that was interesting when I feels like it's actually a challenge. And then accelerating flywheel. So they're really focused on, Phil, I'm sure you love this stuff, pricing optimization, advertising, increasing the DevX percentage is something that they said they would like to do. I felt like this was a Cress and Phil slide showing basically ARPDAO or ABDAO because they use bookings over kind of like revenue. So the slide shows the first negative year-on-year trend for ABDAO in Q4, where I start to see a little bit of worry that the younger and these international audiences are not monetizing. So Cress, dying to get your take on all of this. What do you think?
Well, first of all, they just have an impossible comp, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't really a sign of the apocalypse by any means. They have the biggest games and the brain rot games continue, but Grow a Garden has fallen off a fucking cliff, right? That's tough, right? And I'm not reading too much into that in terms of the overall declines. I think the biggest story here is this age verification thing and what it means in terms of describing what the audience is. And so with these new kind of age checked data, we're starting to see a little bit more evidence as to why they have unsuccessfully in some ways gotten to the 18 plus audience. So based upon the age check data, there was a service that did this, that 73% of the audience is under the age of 18, right? That's a fucking problem, right? That's a fucking problem, right? We don't know what the geo breakout is. US could be actually more than that because over 18 people have a lot more options in the US and tier 1 English countries, right? So there's console, PC, etc. And what we don't actually know, which I was going to say later, is that what is the actual concentration of engagement, right? I mean, it could be 90% is under the age of 18 from an engagement perspective, right? So maybe we'll get more and more of that data as the age check data starts to manifest itself. So as I said, they had an absolutely insane year last year with Steal a Brain Rot and Grow a Garden. In other words, the child torture video creators. And again, the Steal a Brain Rot's still doing well, but it's well below its Q3 peak. And Grow a Garden, again, is in the shitter. So what they need to know is what is next for the platform, right? We need to see some more games that come online that actually could continue to grow that. The fact that they're still growing 20 to 25% from that high last year is actually pretty good. You know what I mean? When you have a shitty demographic of 18 and under driving 75% of your user base, this audience can't monetize. They don't have dispensable income, right? It's really hard to monetize that audience more than what you're doing. That's why their strategy is going after 18 and over, because 18 and under is shitty, right? And on top of that, they're spending more and more money to support the infrastructure of an audience that doesn't monetize. This audience is not necessarily a good thing. It's more of an albatross as you continue to support these 18 and unders that can't monetize very well. So this is the fundamental problem with this whole platform, is that it is just catering to 18 and under. So frankly, I think the stock has gotten destroyed for no reason. I mean, I still think that advertising is still a huge potential. Obviously, only 25% of the audience would care for advertising. So I still think there's opportunity here. I'm actually, not that negative at this level, right? But certainly at 140 seemed ridiculous. So I don't know.
You dropped in this novel game expansion to serve all audiences quote from their shareholder letter. What were you thinking about this?
Well, this is the only data I could find on age check data that revealed the actual percentages. This isn't that much different than what they self-reported. The only incremental information we got is what the under 18 age is versus the under 13 and 13 and above is what they self-report. Looked at this better than I have.
Jeez, don't bury the headline, Eric. This is your big point for weeks. I think you got to take the L on this. So what is the numbers you're referring to? So they required age verification to access chat inside of Roblox. So this is the first chance we're getting to see what is the actual age of the participants because they have to go through this process. And so the thing to keep in mind is that 45% of DAUs have age checked. So the other thing you need to keep in mind is that they're probably self-selecting, knowing that they're going to pass the barrier. So I would imagine that if we were to see this expand to 100% of DAUs, that these numbers would be weighted downwards. But that being said, Roblox has still reported the age group breakout between under 13 and 13 plus in their quarterly earnings reports. And if we look at their internal data, 32% of their audience was under the age of 13. And when we look at the age verification data, it was actually only 35%. So that's pretty close. That's pretty close. That's 3 percentage points. That is not like a big revelation that all these kids were lying. If we look at the percent that were over 13, it was 68% in Roblox's quarterly earnings disclosures, while the age verification had 65%. Again, I expect these numbers to be dragged a little bit, where we'll see more relatively under 13s as more users verify. But that being said, it wasn't this crazy slam dunk. The other thing that I thought was crazy about this data, and you mentioned it, Eric, is this is the first time we've seen over 18 data, right? Because it's mostly been under 13 or over 13 that Roblox has reported on. 27% are over 18? Has anyone met a Roblox user over the age of 18? What the fuck? That's crazy.
Well, it's
crazy.
It's typically a college-aged woman playing Dress to Impress. That was a lot of, I don't know, do you think they're playing that rival shooter game, Phil?
I mean, I am. I think it's great. I still think that's impressive. And to me, that isn't, oh, this is shit. That's room to grow. And Eric, you're completely right. This is the problem I have when I work with all of my education clients. They all come with the same problem, which is that acquisition has been on fire. Kids share things very quickly. This is how social networks tend to spread. Kids who are under the age of 18 tend to share things very quickly. DAU explodes, but they fail to monetize, right? And this is why Roblox introduced gift cards, is because these kids don't always have access to credit cards. And so, yes, this is a big problem. They do need to age up. They do need to get to age groups that have higher disposable income. So I completely agree with you. I just don't think this is as damning as people thought it was. I do think the platform is aging up, although we don't know if it's aging up or they're attracting people over the age of 18 new users, which I think is another kind of hidden question underneath this. But you're right. They do need to go after older users if they want to monetize at higher rates.
And also the advertising falls apart if they don't have over 18, right? So any advertising strategy doesn't work, really. You can't advertise at all to 13 and under. And 13 to 18 demo is just not that interesting to most of the advertisers, and they kind of move away from that.
And remember, eCPMs are correlated with the revenue that the users bring in. If you're not spending, that decreases your eCPMs for the users too. Those things are correlated.
Right.
I think is an interesting area that they're going to have to examine is whether or not there's negative margin users on the Roblox platform. If there's a user in India playing and they're not generating revenue, but they're sucking up server space, it is entirely possible that they're negative margin. And so they need to start examining what they're going to do about that.
No, 100%. That's the whole problem. 75% of the audience is sucking up 90% of the costs, right? And they're not generating the revenue.
That's an optimization lever, though, right? That's an opportunity for them to increase their bookings. I wouldn't paint it in a negative light. I think it's just another way they can make more money.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that there's an opportunity here. It's just that all the bravado about aging up just doesn't seem like it's actually having as much impact as they say, right? The numbers are not showing that they're growing that profitably and capturing a broader audience, but they keep repeating it over and over again. To be clear, this data basically gives the 18 and under, right, which we have not seen ever before, right? We only saw 13 and under, 13 and over. So now we know that 18 and under is 75% and probably 90% of the engagement. That's bad. That's really bad. That is an albatross. That is an absolute albatross to their business model. They need 18 to 44-year-old males, particularly, in order to really drive monetization. And so this is, I think, what people are seeing and getting a little bit spooked about on Wall Street.
So basically, the spiral is that as they push and grow their audience, they get more kids, especially those outside probably tier 1 West. And that means that their infrastructure goes up, but the audience cost also increases, especially since those users are not that likely to watch ads or make any in-app purchase revenue. And that essentially decreases your unit economics. Just everything weakens as they grow outside tier 1 West. Is that?
Yeah, basically.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to just puff an episode that we did with Roblox. It's going to release in a week or two, but we talked about these novel experiences and their algorithm and how that is changing. We had Nick Turno, their senior vice president of engine and creator engineering, on the podcast. And he talked really about that what they're looking for is more games with retention and longevity. He didn't specify that they didn't want something and want something else, but we did talk a lot about how the algorithm is structured at the point and what has changed. And my understanding from that is that the focus will be more on games like Rival or Brookhaven or Creatures of Sonaria. So really pushing towards games that have a lot of longevity, almost like RPGs and shooters and stuff that has been on other platforms for a long time.
Yeah, good luck. Good fucking luck. All right, moving on.
Let's be honest. You're tired of chasing installs across the same crowded network. We all are. That's why Vibes built a new playbook. They're the fastest growing gamified rewards platform, and they're helping studios scale smarter, not just bigger. AI-powered targeting means you finally hit the audience you want. And with their new ROAS optimization engine, performance doesn't just grow, it levels up. So if you're looking for growth with a fresh angle, check out Vibes. It's built different, it's designed for growth, and it's powered by good advice. Check out their DOF exclusive case studies by following the link in the description and go to thybs.co. That's thybs.co. Share your email and join the waitlist.
Game devs. Here at Heroic Labs, we know that great gameplay is what players love, but integrating metagame features like challenges, progression, and rewards is crucial for retention and monetization. But coding them is a tedious and time-consuming process. That's why top studios have turned to Hero from Heroic Labs. Hero provides a complete suite of battle-tested metagame features that are quick to implement, letting you spend more time on the core gameplay experience. Ready to ship fully featured, engaging games? Check out Hero today at heroiclabs.com.
In today's hyper-competitive digital landscape, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download isn't just insightful, it's the difference between scaling and stagnating. Enter AppsFlyer, the undisputed leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics. They've mastered the science of making every ad dollar work harder by revealing exactly where your players come from and how they interact with your app. Their platform transforms mountains of complex data into clear, actionable intelligence that separates winning campaigns from budget-draining experiments. And I know that many of the top game companies leverage AppsFlyer and are a key partner in their success. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance. Let's get into the next topic, which is Supercell CEO releases his annual blog post from Ilka. Take it away, Mishka.
Yeah. Before we start on this, I want to object to the idea that we should be covering this at this length. I just want to object to that. I think his letter, this was a good one. I'll give him that. But I'm not quite sure how contemporary Supercell is these days in terms of overall mobile market. But,
it felt outdated to me.
Let me ease people in because I don't know if everybody has read it. It does circulate a lot, but how many people read it? Because it is a long one. It's like a deconstruction blog post from 2012. It's a long ass one. Anyway, in Supercell's 2025 CEO letter, Ilkka Paananen, the CEO, the founder, frames the year as a near record, which is another way of saying the revenue declined by 4%. This was driven mostly by a historic rebound year for Clash Royale, while admitting new hit launches remain brutally hard. The couple of takeaways from here on a high level, the headline win was of course, Clash Royale. Insane re-acceleration. The re-engaged players doubled. The new players grew by 500%, which he attributes to long runway of progression simplification, sentiment recovery, and then a spark moment that caught the fire, plus a new mode, Merge Tactics. I don't know how many played it. I played it. It wasn't that good. Repurposed from the canceled Clash Mini. At the same time, he notes Royale is already sliding off the peak. It has actually slid back to the normal.
Stop. How could he not mention UA? It was like downloads and revenue was lock fucking step, right? This is not some like organic rediscovery of Squad Busters because of some new features. Dude, they found UA. They hired a new UA.
Can we just wait before I tell you you're wrong? Because EBITDA looked very healthy. Their EBITDA was $1 billion. Actually,
that's bullshit. That's bullshit. You could just sell right in the data that there's no way that this was not supported by a huge UA push. Not to mention, you hear it from people that they were spending insane money of UA. So already this is complete bullshit, right? In my view.
We have a full deconstruction on their marketing. Just go on deconstructorfun.com/blog. You will see that on Clash Royale's marketing.
But why wasn't it mentioned in the letter? This is what bothers me. Why isn't it not mentioned in the letter? Because they're obfuscating bullshit, right?
This is PR bullshit. Letter. This is a shareholder PR letter. Like you
exactly.
This is not Ilka like waking up on a Sunday in December and be like, you know what? I really want to kind of like internalize what happened this year and write a blog post. Like, of course, not.
Continue. I'm going to walk away because
hold on, Eric. No, you can't walk away. Do you think they're spending on negative UA? Of course, they're spending money. If your LTV goes up, of course you should spend more money on marketing.
Not at all. What is the point? If they're profitably,
if they're buying profitably, then what are we shitting them on for?
No, because he doesn't mention it. He doesn't mention it intentionally, right? It was a UA driven uptick. That's it. The same thing as the last time. Last year, it was like all UA driven.
But the only thing that lets you spend more on UA is if the game improves and the
game's working
increase.
And it's
yes, exactly.
The game always worked.
No. They have been laying the foundation with crucial new features, evolutions. They totally nailed.
Okay, I'll capitulate on that. But the fact that they couldn't maintain the audience doesn't mean they invented something that actually was good for retention and continued monetization.
I think that's the most damning piece. This is
a pop and drop bullshit, right?
Yeah, I agree. That I think is the scintillating argument here is that this happened in Brawl Stars, this happened in Clash Royale, and are they just going to do the same thing with Clash of Clans next year where they just have single big beats and then it falls off a cliff?
The fact that he omits the fact that they must have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on UA to get here is testimony of the fact that he is completely bullshitting.
Tell me why EBITDA is shit, and I shouldn't look at that.
I think they've maintained EBITDA, right? They've maintained profitability, right? They pulled back from UA on Brawl Stars and just put it on Squad Busters,
So they found the next best product that they could spend profitable marketing dollars on. That's your criticism, and they were able to maintain EBITDA.
Correct.
That's the slam dunk. I mean, I don't think
no,
that's...
I think he's just saying... I think... Let me referee this. I think Cress's point is that nowhere in the explanation of why it was successful does he mention that they also increased their marketing. And so if to be fair, he should have said, not only did we have a product, we had marketing.
Yeah, you have to understand that in Supercell's PR, they always talk about how big is their organic traffic, like it's 80% and that kind of stuff. That's kind of key for the messaging. So he can't come out and say, hey, actually, we, again, found a way to spend more profitably and grow this game. It always has to be about organic traffic. And of course, that means that they're not they're not kings of attribution either. We actually had this public conversation on LinkedIn when the head of Brawl Stars then was saying, basically, I think it was like 80% is organic traffic for Brawl Stars during the year. And then Matei was also asking, like, how do you attribute those? And basically, they don't attribute creators, they don't attribute influence, they don't attribute events,
creators
they don't attribute anything. Yeah, exactly. So if you don't attribute your hundreds of millions of dollars spent on these YouTube videos that are coming everywhere and that army of creators, then yeah, sure, that's organic. You can put in a TV ad with Lil Wayne and say, if that would have worked, that would have been organic traffic, by the way.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. So
that's how they do it.
Now that we've refereed that, continue on with your recap.
All right. So the headline loss. So Clash Royale was the win. What was the loss? The loss was the game that we deemed would not work and soured our relationship with Supercell, which is Squad Busters. And it did become the first game ever killed after big ass global launch, despite the $75 million in downloads, despite the $100 million in spend, because post-launch retention behavior didn't match even large betas. So they stated the lessons: big betas still don't predict global. They understated meta, long-term retention. They were really short numbers looking in the beginning, and they built too big of a marketing push before the vision was deeply validated. Okay. Then we talk about the industry thesis. So this was kind of like the big thing that Ilkka was posting about, is that the mobile games are coasting with a approximately 3% annual growth over 5 years per Newzoo. And he was saying that the West is falling behind and that the new billion-dollar hits are not coming from the West, but they're coming more from the East, because only 2 out of 22 games that made 1 billion were launched by Western companies. That's Scopely, and Turkey also put in as a Western companies. It's, I don't know which side of the strafe they are, but anyways. And then what they'll do, so of course, all these blog posts are also sort of like internal letters. So what Supercell is doing in the future is they're going to double down on investment in new games, innovation. They're going to reorganize into separate, I think they did this already, but he talked about the live games versus new games org. And this is something that he's been talking about forever, is how they're going to run new games like startups with tighter budget constraints and profit participation, so revenue sharing. And while all of this is leveraging Supercell Launchpad, essentially it becomes a big employer branding piece of why you, the builder, the startup person, whoever who wants to build a new great game, should actually not set up a company, but join Supercell, the Launchpad, and build it within Supercell. Phil, what were your takeaways? I saw you were very positive on Slack. You were defending
this. I think this is probably his best letter in half a decade. It was the most direct and decisive I think he's ever been. They continue to talk about squad busters, and unlike last time, I thought this was a very clear postmortem on the game. They showed some real data. They had 30% D7. They also mentioned that $1 billion is the bar. They mentioned they didn't test their meta as much as they should have. They talked about the partners being really excited about the game. It's everything we wrote in the Squad Busters 1 month later.
Yeah.
Like this whole letter was a love letter to Eric Kress and to Deconstructor of Fun. Right? It was.
Come on.
I mean, when I was going through the industry thesis that Ilkka had, I actually thought there was actually in quotes, and it should have been as Eric Kress says on TWiG. But he says growth must come from new platforms and new audiences. There's too much over optimization culture. I mean, maybe the PR team is listening. But that's exactly what we've been talking about on this podcast. We got Squad Busters wrong, specifically me, but in that 1 month later, we ended up getting a lot of the reasons they were confident and I was confident accurately. I would say the thing that I thought was most interesting was the key line where he says, I've rarely seen great products emerge from teams with unlimited budgets and endless runways. So he's actually laying down some teeth. He's talking about profit sharing, right? Because this is the thing I always see CEOs do, is they want to recreate this garage culture. They want to recreate this startup, their fondest memories, but they never create the same set of incentives they need to make that happen, which was equity and money. This is what makes these founders leave, is they don't have the incentives. And so, okay, we're going to introduce profit sharing. If you remember, we've been following some of these Chinese companies, which are offering shares in the individual games. They're spinning up individual companies for the games. So this is a run at this. The other thing he says is limited runway. You can't have an unlimited runway to make these things with unlimited budgets. Here's the thing where it starts to become bullshit territory, Mr. Ilkka. What about your own internal initiatives applying the same bar to? Is this only for the AI labs? Where the is North America? Donde estas? North America. What about all these games that have been in soft launch forever? Is the boat game going to get the axe? Like, where is the runway for the internal initiatives? Or do you get a separate bar if you're not a part of the Finnish HQ? The last thing I'll say is this clearly wasn't a letter written by someone who's trying to become the world's least powerful CEO. Who is the one that determines a game should be worth $1 billion? Who is the one that determines profit sharing in limited runway? That is not consistent with the culture he's been preaching, because what? You have a principal agent problem, and you need to have a principal determined the set of incentives the agents are going to run on, or else the incentives will change. And that's what happens when you have a larger organization. You have to step up and be a stronger leader. And I wish he would just come out and admit this.
Yeah, I love it. I did not know that people did not know that there are external PR companies involved when these are written. When I first said it on a podcast, I got messages from Supercell. Dude, like, how did you know? It's like every CEO does it. This is not Supercell specific. So as in this case as well, there is a PR agency working closely with the CEO. It happens in every single company. And they do this because of two reasons why the shareholder letter comes out. First of all is they want to get ahead of the story, because in Finland, by law, you have to publish all of your financials. These financials would come out in any reason. This is not being done because they want to support the Finnish ecosystem by writing this blog post. The ecosystem is supported already by the company being acquired twice, first for 5 billion and the second time for 10 billion. That is the support the ecosystem needs. And the second is because this type of a blog post is authentic. It really feels authentic because the CEO is a big part in writing this. It creates positive PR, and through that, it creates two types of branding: employer branding and CEO branding. I think there's two reasons to care about this blog post, because first, Supercell is still a really, really unique studio in all the world. Like, it's Valve, Nintendo type of a level, at least for me. And the second part is the openness, Phil, as you said, that comes through this letter. It's very rare, and we don't have a lot of public mobile gaming companies. This type of openness is fantastic because it allows us to at least get some real data and not just hear through.
You're absolutely right. If anyone thinks that Ilkka sits down at his desk in the Finnish forest and writes this himself is surely kidding themselves. Especially if you are a publicly traded, public company who has to release financials, there are 15 people looking at this, going over every single, detail of what he's writing. I'm sure it takes weeks. I'm sure his leadership staff is involved in, what is the message? What are we trying to say? How are we trying to position what's going on? So you're absolutely right about those things. And I would be shocked if people thought that. In fact, I think AI had a big role in this. Yeah. One of the things that I feel like I'm getting better at is spotting when AI helps with writing things, especially because of some of the framing that it uses. It's one of those is the not this, but that.
But
it's like with the dash. And it's if please, again, stop using this function, this, verbal template right now, because it just screams that you've used AI in your writing. So I did see a little like AI in here. I don't know. Did you see that, Mishka?
Yeah, of course. Ton.
Just to be clear, Warren Buffett writes his own letters. So there's no reason Ilkka can't write his own letter too.
No, it's not going to happen when you have to have so many people helping to check, what goes into these things.
Yeah, and Warren Buffett also gets audited. It's not about him not writing this. Of course he writes it. Of course, these are the points that he wants to get through. All we're saying is that this is done together with, yes, the leadership team gets the view usually, and the other PR agencies or one agency gets to work on this a lot. But the ultimate ideas behind this come from the CEO. It's not like the CEO doesn't push these things that I want to talk about. And one of them, is the fact that Ilkka really says this: I believe the answer is innovation. Yet this whole blog is pretty much like a last year's blog post, which makes a case study for portfolio resurrection.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I wanted to say, where I struggle with this because he ends on this innovation and everything is innovation, and all of their success the last few years has been in going back and live operating and franchise management and long-term, and it hasn't been an innovation. It's been in ideation around what is existing and working in long-term franchises. And none of their innovation has worked in the last, 6-7 years? Now, listen, I think we would all love innovation, but we're realizing that is really difficult. If I were them, I would have come out and said, listen, yes, I would have spent more time on what are they doing to revive Heyday or Clash of Clans or their other franchises. That would have been probably the biggest massive strategy to put forward is this is working for us. And we're going to do more of this, not AI, although the profit sharing thing I think is great, because the other thing that I'm hearing is that, and Mishka, you talk about this all the time, 4:30 p.m. rolls around and, all of the Finns walk out and they're like, work-life balance.
Yeah.
Where is the hunger? Where is the drive that you have when you're at a startup and you're running out of runway and you're not going to make your payroll? Turkey still has that. China still has that. Startups have that. Supercell feels like it's lost that magic.
I'm not that interested in this Supercell topic. It's only once a year, but at least before I know that they were paying pretty much 4x the Finnish salary to a normal dev. So because once you get in, let's say you're making 5,000 or 10,000 a month, then they doubled that before because every year was 100% bonus. I believe last year was the first one where people didn't get 100% bonus, but they would double it automatically by the company bonus. So now it's 20K. And then there will be these option plans that are internal. So basically the company gives you options and it buys it back. So through that scheme, that also doubles the revenue. So somebody leaves a company and when Supercell comes calling, it's natural to leave because your salary is going to quadruple. And a normal dev in that company would be making almost a salary of a mid-size company CEO. And through that, Jen, comes complacency because you are getting paid a lot. Why would you rock the boat? Why would you think anything else that you are amazing? And this company is amazing because look, I'm in this palisade of an office space with baristas and saunas and like, it is a beautiful office and you're getting paid out of wazoo and the company, blog posts are amazing. What's the problem? What are you trying to tell me? So that has at least before been the issue. But as we've seen now, if people have seen on LinkedIn, there are people changing, they're moving. So the company is becoming much more like conscious about that they need new blood. They need hungry people. And when they talk about Spark Labs, like that's the other one thing. As we've talked about on this podcast, and Phil, you've said this multiple times, these are people who don't even work for Supercell. They're like contractors and they're placed in a different fucking building. They're not even in that palisade. Like they can only dream about the chefs and the baristas. They sit in a different bunker and they make new games over there. So yes, that element of hunger is coming there. And they also actually send some old Supercellians there. And it is kind of different because like if you're a Supercell, like, oh shit, yeah, I would like to powwow on this new game, but we're actually having an offsite in fucking Costa Rica. So I'm going to peace out. You guys keep working on this new game and I'm going to come back. But anyways, like they are adding these elements and the culture is changing through that. But yes, it was very complacent in many ways that I was hearing and still is through old people, but the old people are getting the pink slips and the bonuses to kind of seek new adventures. I want to say a couple of things about the sort of learnings. Like the one was Squad Busters. So they say, why did we launch? And this was, as Phil said, incredibly open. Early retention numbers were solid and improving. But we're talking about day 1 to day 7 as decision-making numbers. They said Apple and Google loved it. Chris would say, who gives a fuck?
Blame Apple and Google. Of course, they're going to tell you whatever.
Yeah. If Apple and Google love it, do not ship it, right?
Cancel it,
dude.
Every time they do App of the Year, it's like Apex Legends. It's like, that game is killed. No, it won.
They don't know all about gaming on their platforms, that they should not be even a consideration.
No. Let me defend. Like, they know all about gaming, but they only know what Supercell is going to tell them. They don't know the entire picture. They don't know like the roadmap. And slightly in defense is, I think this is the first time that when they went through this beta process and they started to get these numbers, anyone who just runs it by day 1 or day 7, like obviously you're not looking at the long-term impact of, does somebody actually like and stick around for this game? What I don't love that Supercell did was like blame other people for why they launched. Like they should have known their own shit and not said, well, I was told I was pretty, so I went out to the modeling agency to try. Like that's bullshit.
Well, again, like the problem is that it's the misalignment, right? Like having the support of the platforms is irrelevant these days, right? If you can't drive UA profitably, then it doesn't matter if Apple and Google loves you. They don't matter anymore, right? As a platform, that's not where you drive traffic.
Yeah, because we talked about like discovery inside of the App Store and the Google Play Store is much more difficult. That isn't as relevant as it used to be 10 years ago to launch a game. I do think, remember, Google did allow them to do something special where they were able to pre-reg the game inside of another game, another Supercell game. So Google Play made some concessions and did some like magic stuff to allow them to be like one of the first companies to do that. So that was actually, I think, super cool and interesting and led to what do they have, 35, 40 million pre-regs on that? Which just didn't convert. If they had done more testing and they had seen if the meta was there, if they had seen long-term retention, marketing actually worked. They drove all of those installs. What failed was that the product couldn't keep them. So even though they spent all that money, marketing actually performed.
Yeah. And I mean, Ilkka puts it himself in this blog post. He said, we walked away with obvious learnings. And I don't know. It was weird that these are the things that drove you. The Apple, Google praise, the internal pressure of let's just fucking go. We got 100% success rate. We can live ops anything, which is kind of true these days. And so it was just a definition of a company hubris that cost $150 million. Good for them. The West is behind and the industry is coasting. So this is this type of stuff that Ilka leads on LinkedIn. So this is kind of like the CEO's personal message. Yes, there's the fact of, everything is coming through Asia and only a few things are coming from the West. He does mention a little bit on a side note that there are some structural disadvantages. Yeah, like Chinese companies have a TAM that is like about 600 million players more than a Western company. Yeah, that's a little bit there. And they can also do very misleading ads and don't have to, adhere to IP rights. Sure. But he doesn't mention the good old partner Apple for destroying the user acquisition market and essentially killing it for Western developers. But overall, with this sentiment, the main point that he's making is we're missing these new games that truly change the way we play, like Pokemon Go or Clash Royale when it came out. Actually, Call of Duty was also the type of game that totally kind of like broke my head and what's possible within shooter space on mobile. And I agree, but at the same time, like Supercell is not innocent here. Yes, they've done a lot of innovation, but they also done a lot of games that have very little innovation, like Spooky Pop, Heyday Pop, Smashland, the 3 Clash of Clans games that they announced didn't ship. Like all of those were very iterative. And it also is weird a way of talking about the growth, because Supercell's growth comes through LiveOps. It doesn't really come through new games anymore.
I'm not letting that fly. Dude, this is not a LiveOps thing. They're positioning it as a LiveOps thing. It was a UA thing with additional features on the games, right? This is not a LiveOps thing at all, right? It's total UA.
But Cress, why isn't it LiveOps Plus? It's like one of the, you can't have one without the other.
Really? You don't think they could have done a huge UA program with the existing game and drove revenue?
I do not.
No, they shouldn't have. They should already be doing that. You should always be spending up until your marginal cost equals your marginal
But they're
revenue.
not.
We don't know that.
Dude, the downloads were down in the floor, and all of a sudden they peak exactly with
Because
in line with revenue.
The game had changed, which I'm sure gave them better early monetization signals, which extended LTV, which lets them bid higher in the ad auction. If this is correct, Eric, and they were not spending up until marginal cost equals marginal revenue, that's really stupid. If you're suggesting that they moved their payback window out to get programs like this done, I think that would also be a knock against them. Right? Because you should be doing this on all games all the time.
Dude, how can you explain that revenue is down below the original revenue run rate for these games? We're already seeing it decline to the same levels as they were. This is less than a year, and we're already there.
I think that is your strongest point.
We have it from last December. It's called I Analyzed Clash Royale's Marketing. Here's what I found. All the graphs. This is done together with Sensor Tower, analyzing exactly this question. People, if you're interested, there's going to be a link in the description. So I want to just end this with the main thing that is the key statement, the key call to action of this blog post. And that is that Supercell is a great launchpad and a place for builders. So on one hand, yes, it's an amazing company to work with all the benefits, this incredible talent that works at the company, with the games that they have made, with the brand that they have. It's a fantastic place to work. But when we're talking about founders, because this is the type of audience that they want to come to the company, you have to take it into account of, Supercell's investments over the past decade, their acquisition of companies. What has happened to those? Where are the founders that they have actually invested in? The history is not great. The only thing that is mentioned out of Supercell investments is that Channel 37 had 1 million pre-signups, but there's no talk about Frogmind. That was super innovative company that they acquired that is now Hypop. They do not talk about Space Ape, but the founders are long gone and the company has been dissolved. There's not talk about Metacore that essentially slipped outside top 5 in a category that it created. So this talk of this is the best place for founders could be, very much could be, and most likely they're building towards that, but we don't have any evidence that it has been.
Way to sell it for them. Way to sell it.
All right,
everyone. The Supercell ban is now back on. We will not talk about Supercell for the next couple episodes.
12 months.
No. I'm
See
sure
you next
they'll do
letter.
something else.
Yeah, see you next year.
All right. See you next. See everyone next week.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.